Now? No. With this one? Yes? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, but that sound is delayed, so. Yeah, no, I don't need that now then. Okay, so good afternoon and welcome everyone to this session, Channeling REDD+ Incentives to the Ground. So welcome to the ones that are here today in the UNDP pavilion, and also welcome to those ones that are connecting through internet. So we have here today a great panel. So let me please first introduce the panel, and then we will start with this informal and friendly conversation about how these 4 countries that we have today here are implementing the REDD+ results-based payment project. We've heard in this COP many times, this is about implementation, implementation, implementation. Well, so we brought here these representatives from these 4 countries, from Indonesia, from Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Brazil, because they're the ones that are implementing these projects. They're the ones that have the experiences, the lessons learned, and we want to hear from them, from you, so all these experiences. So thank you very much for being here and joining us in this session. So I will start with Dr. Wahyu Marhaka. So he's the Director of Sectoral and Regional Resources Mobilization in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Welcome to this panel. Thank you. We have Maria Elena Herrera. Is the REDD+ Director in National Forestry Finance Fund. Welcome to this panel. We have also Yanori Rojas. He's an indigenous specialist working in UNDP country office. Welcome, Yanori. We have also here Clarice Cruz. Is a Director of the Forest Conservation and Environmental Services in the Ministry of Environment in Brazil. Welcome, Clarice. And we have also Karina Barrera, thank you, the Climate Change Undersecretary at the Ministry of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition. So thank you all of you. And I will also, couple of logistical things here. We have, as I said, people connected through internet. We have interpretation. So for those that want to have this interpretation, we'll need to log in into this. Can we have this slide again? Sorry. Yeah. So we need to log in this Zoom link, and there you can choose between English, Spanish, Bahasa, or Portuguese. So we need also to speak very close to the microphone. I don't know if I'm doing it right. Okay, and try to speak slowly. That's actually a challenge for me, because the interpreters are asking for that. So let's start this discussion then. A bit of a context and to introduce this session. These 4 projects in Indonesia, in Ecuador, and in Brazil, and in Costa Rica is a portfolio of nearly more than $270 million is being implemented with the UNDP support. And in some of these countries, we are using an innovative UNDP instrument, not in all of them, just in the case of Indonesia and in Costa Rica and Ecuador. And we would like to hear more about you, of the use of this instrument, how these funds are being channeled to this instrument, and how is impacting, having impact on the ground, so especially on the indigenous people, territories, and on women. So in the case of, so this instrument, as I said, we will hear more about that, but it's an instrument that is completely different, the way that the projects are being implemented traditionally. So we don't have activities, and then at the end of the project, we try to see if we have achieved the results. With this instrument, what we do is, with the responsible party, UNDP is pre-agreeing some results. These results will be verified, and then after this verification from the independent assessor is done, then the countries receive the payment through the instrument. So we will hear more about that. In the case of Costa Rica, we actually now going through this second process of verification. I think next week is going to be finalized. Same in the case of Indonesia, first verification process, and very soon in the case of Ecuador. In Costa Rica, we've seen in 9 months how through this instrument we've been able to disburse nearly 50% of the $54 million that the project had. So it means like nearly $24 million were disbursed last year. So that's fast delivery. That's what we're hearing here that the countries need. So we would like to hear more about that. So please, Maria Elena, could you tell us how these REDD+ investments are being now used in Costa Rica through this instrument?
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias a Naciones Unidas al programa de Naciones Unidas por la invitación. Sí, efectivamente, Costa Rica, como algunos pueden conocer, tenemos un proceso que viene desde hace más de 13 años y precisamente esto fue lo que nos permitió poder acceder más rápido a los recursos de pago basado en resultado. ¿Por qué? Porque estuvimos con información preparada para presentar el proyecto y tener respuesta más rápida del GCF. El otro tema importante del pago basado en resultado y por qué hemos logrado estos dos desembolsos tan grandes en el país es que el proceso de construcción del proyecto se basó en políticas muy fuertes en el país. Una es el Sistema Nacional de Áreas de Conservación, que Costa Rica tiene un 24% en estos terrenos con áreas de cobertura, y el Programa de Pago de Servicio Ambiental, que tiene más de 20 años de implementación con el sector privado, en donde ya existe una confianza entre el gobierno y el sector privado en la implementación de mecanismos de reconocimiento de servicios ambientales. Entonces, el proyecto de pago basado en resultado está basado precisamente en estos dos tipos de titularidad. Una es implementar el mecanismo con un tipo de pago de servicio ambiental que se llama el contrato de reducción de emisiones forestales, en el cual reconocemos a los dueños de terrenos con bosque el servicio ambiental de mitigación de gases de efecto invernadero. Y el segundo mecanismo, que es muy fuerte, también es el programa nacional que existe para atender los incendios en el país. En el tema de implementación de mecanismos con el sector privado, tenemos los pueblos indígenas. Y ellos han venido con nosotros en un proceso de trabajo año a año hasta lograr concretar los instrumentos de implementación de los recursos también a nivel nacional. Entonces, este proceso de definición en el proyecto de pago basado en resultado, en indicadores sobre acciones de política que ya el país viene implementando, es lo que nos ha permitido acceder a los recursos. Esa definición de indicadores junto con el grupo del proyecto PNUD y la definición de estos indicadores, hemos podido en estos dos desembolsos ya recuperar o traer al país más del 50% de los recursos del Fondo Verde del Clima que van a ser aplicados en estos dos programas. En el Programa Nacional de Pago de Servicio Ambiental, reconociéndole a dueños y dueñas de terreno con bosques el servicio de mitigación de gases y atender acciones de temas de la estrategia de tala ilegal y incendios para atraer también acciones para atender la deforestación y la degradación de los bosques. Entonces, este ha sido muy importante, este ingreso de recursos, porque ya nos permite implementar una acción de la Estrategia Nacional RED definida con las partes. Gracias.
Gracias, María Elena. Y en el caso, como les comentaba también, de Ecuador, hemos escuchado ahora Costa Rica. Sorry, I just... Sorry, I switched to English. So thank you. Thank you, María Elena. So we've been hearing about Costa Rica and how you're using these resources. And as I mentioned, also in Ecuador, they now working on developing this instrument. It's a different context, so that's why it's so nice to have you all here, so to change different points of views and lessons learned, because it's a different context, as I say. It's not the same amount of resources that Costa Rica has, but also there are some challenges and advantages of this instrument that Karina Barrera could share with us. We have a video also from the process in Ecuador, so can we maybe play the video? Ecuador.
Thank you. You are taller than me. It is not possible. Yeah?
Is that working? Maybe we can play the video after Karina actually explain us
don't worry.
about the process.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you for having me today. The case of Ecuador is a little bit different because we have been working with subnational governments, and we have choose at the beginning we designed a process that includes the subnational governments, and we have to choose to establish the criteria to choose these governments. Then in some cases they structure a partnership between them. Yeah, you can go if it's okay. No? Okay. And this partnership, in some cases, we call mancomunidad. Some subnational governments that join and they make some proposals. These proposals were qualified by some members of the Ministry of Environment. Then these proposals were selected, and the mechanism to receive the money is another fund. Is a FIAS, Fondo de Inversión Ambiental y Social. FIAS is the mechanism that is going to canalize these funds to the subnational governments. This is the main difference. This fund was not canalized directly from the government. We had to use another fund. It means that we had to invest more resources to manage this process. Then I think that the other important issue, and maybe a learned lesson, is that the subnational governments need to enhance their capacities to use this money. And if you don't have a previous process, maybe it could be a bottleneck to solve. We are working in this, but the other issue is that part of the play rules require that you put the money to implement the protected areas in the subnational government, and it means that they have the political willing to put this money, and the process should be continuous in order to get the results. But at the beginning it was a compromise, but sometimes it is not the same development of each one. They have different performance in between the subnational governments. Some of them are successful, and some of them are not successful in this process. So we have many lessons learned, but we really know that we are aware that this process are a very fast system to deliver funds into the territory, but it requires a previous process, like I mentioned now.
Thank you, Karina.
Yeah.
So we've heard then that we have some challenges here. In the case of Costa Rica, again, this is this payment for ecosystem services scheme. that it has been already established for many, many, many years in the country. So we know that this is something that was in favor to start using this instrument. And because in the case of Ecuador, we've seen that there was a political willing, but it needs to still have this political willing and a lot of capacity building to make this instrument successful. And then we have also Dr. Wahyu in the case of Indonesia. There are also some programs and initiatives that have been prioritized for this instrument. So could you tell us, please, which are these initiatives and these programs that have been prioritized in the case of Indonesia, and why were they chosen?
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues. Before I telling the program that were chosen from Indonesia, I would like to share the political background why Indonesia is very important to access RBP, collaborated with UNDP. As we know that Indonesia has the third largest tropical forest in the world, about 120 million hectares totally. And then in this focus area, we develop and rising ambition. Yeah, actually, this year we also submit enhanced nationally determined contribution, which the target increasing from the 29% to become 31.89%. This is actually the newest one in Indonesia, and for CM2 is rise to become a 43.2%, and to the forest sector is expected to contribute actually to achieve the NDC around 17.4% and 25.4 CM2 to overall NDC. This is so big actually, and because of this, we try to calculate what amount the total cost for implementing NDC in Indonesia. We considering and we calculated around until 2030 we need around 59.85 billion US dollars. It's a very big money, very big resources we have to mobilize from our resources and also from international. So funding, of course, is not sufficient for Indonesia. So that's why we develop, and Indonesia 2 years ago actually, Indonesia the first country in Asia Pacific to gain funding by the Green Climate Fund. Yeah, we already know, with a total amounts around 103.78 million US dollar. This is the first case in the world, and we get the situation, and right now we implemented the investment and the program at the first stage, and start from the next January we will move to second stage actually. From this money, actually Indonesia will invest it in the implementation of national REDD+ strategy, focusing on strengthening REDD+ coordination and implementation, and supporting decentralized sustainable forest governance by extending and enhancing the implementation of social forestry and forest management unit. This is our power actually on the ground. We develop any program on the ground using and facilitated the social forest program. There are some thematic program actually on the ground used to disburse RDD finance. The first one is social forestry. Of course, this is very important for us in Indonesia. We have more than 3,000 local people in Indonesia, so we collaborated with them to disburse this financing from GCF. The second one is forest management unit. We already have the forest management unit in many areas in Indonesia. The third one is forest and land rehabilitation, and the fourth one is forest fire management. Yes, we already know that Indonesia is very fragile regarding because of the forest fire. So within 3 years, the last 3 years, we very successful to control the forest fire. So we declined the emission from the peatland. And the last one is a sustainable livelihood. We develop economic sector sustainability on the ground. There are 5 thematics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wahyu. And I think we can play the video now from Ecuador that explains also the process of the performance-based
El
payment.
Ministerio del Ambiente, Agua y Transición Ecológica, junto con el Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo PNUD y el Fondo de Inversión Ambiental Sostenible FIAS, implementan el acuerdo de pago basado en desempeño.
Una herramienta innovadora para la protección de los bosques.
¿Sabías que en el Ecuador se deforestaron más de 82.000 hectáreas de bosques entre el 2016 y 2018?
Esto equivale a 2 veces del tamaño de la ciudad de Quito.
Para enfrentar esta problemática, el Ministerio del Ambiente, Agua y Transición Ecológica ejecuta varias acciones para reducir la deforestación y cuidar los bosques.
Por los esfuerzos realizados en el 2014, el Fondo Verde del Clima entregó al país $18.5 millones para implementar el proyecto de pago por resultados REDD+ Ecuador.
Parte de estos fondos se distribuirán entre los gobiernos autónomos descentralizados a través de la herramienta denominada Acuerdo de Pago Basado en Desempeño.
¿Qué es el Acuerdo de Pago Basado en Desempeño?
Es un mecanismo que consiste en la entrega de incentivos económicos a los gobiernos autónomos descentralizados o mancomunidades una vez que hayan cumplido con las metas establecidas para la gestión de sus áreas de conservación y uso sustentable, ACUS.
Un asesor independiente valida si se han cumplido los objetivos de los indicadores de desempeño y el Fondo de Inversión Ambiental Sostenible administra los recursos de este acuerdo.
¿Cuáles son los pasos del acuerdo de pago basado en desempeño?
1. El PNUD como agencia implementadora del proyecto firma el acuerdo de pago basado en desempeño con el FIAS, que actúa como parte responsable.
2. El FIAS y cada uno de los GATS o mancomunidades seleccionados firman un convenio donde se detallan los resultados que los gobiernos locales deberán cumplir anualmente por un periodo de 3 años.
3. Cada año los GATS o mancomunidades presentan al FIAS un informe sobre el cumplimiento de los indicadores de desempeño.
4. El FIAS sistematiza, monitorea y remite el informe de resultados al asesor independiente.
5. Solo si las metas son verificadas por el asesor independiente, el PNUD desembolsa el dinero al FIAS.
6. El FIAS realiza el pago basado en desempeño al GAT o mancomunidad de acuerdo al monto asignado y al alcance de los resultados establecidos.
Tras un proceso de selección, el Ministerio del Ambiente, Agua y Transición Ecológica a través del proyecto beneficiará a los GATS o mancomunidades de la región Costa y Sierra que hayan constituido áreas de conservación y uso sustentable en zonas prioritarias para REDD+.
Así, Ecuador avanza en la tarea de implementar medidas y acciones REDD+ para contribuir a la mitigación del cambio climático con énfasis en frenar la deforestación, recuperar los bosques y sus reservas de carbono.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So we've seen then again in Ecuador how this instrument is being used at some national level. And now I would like to reflect a bit more on the inclusion of social safeguards and gender through this instrument. And going back to Maria Elena and to Costa Rica, that it was explaining us about the Payment for Ecosystem Services scheme in Costa Rica. Could you please share with us how the government is being ensuring the participation of indigenous people? Because one also of the strengths of this instrument is that it's not just an instrument that we can use to fast deliver financial resources, on the ground, but also how we ensure that social safeguards are complied. So in the case, again, of Costa Rica, it's been based on a national process that already exists, and we would like to hear from you about this national process and how the indigenous people has been participating in the payment for ecosystem services in the country. Please, María Elena.
Ok, bueno, Costa Rica, como mencioné, desarrolla desde hace más de 20 años un programa de pago de servicio ambiental que tiene alrededor de más de 300...
We hold for a while. Yeah, maybe we stop for a while. This is an innovative way to communicate a message. We should do that. After the session, we can do the same and we can all rap.
¿Ya?
Yeah.
Ok.
Thank you.
Costa Rica tiene un programa que es el programa de pago de servicio ambiental, el cual reconoce 4 servicios ambientales que prestan los bosques de terrenos privados. Entonces, los territorios indígenas han participado de este esquema desde 1997. Ha sido un proceso en el cual hemos ido tanto ellos como el gobierno aprendiendo y conociéndonos y a tener confianza entre ambos. Este proceso inicia con el pago de servicio ambiental y en un principio ellos solo podían ingresar 300 hectáreas al programa. Costa Rica es un país muy pequeño, somos 5 millones de hectáreas, 25% está cubierto de áreas silvestres protegidas y el otro 25% con bosque. Es posible insertarlo en programas de pago de servicio ambiental en terrenos privados. Los territorios indígenas en Costa Rica representan un 7% de la cobertura total, son aproximadamente 300,000 hectáreas que tienen disponible y el programa se financia de un impuesto único a los combustibles, lo cual no nos permite ingresar todos los propietarios al programa porque los recursos son escasos. Ellos empezaron a participar con 400 hectáreas y hemos ido avanzando. Ahora pueden ingresar 1,000 hectáreas por año, pero aún así no todos sus terrenos pueden formar parte del programa. Entonces hemos ido trabajando con ellos en red, en todo un proceso de participación, de consulta libre, previa, informada, en donde ellos han externado cuál es su situación con respecto a la participación en el programa, cuál es su cosmovisión sobre el proyecto, sobre el programa, qué ven de mejoras para ellos, y ha sido una evolución en donde al día de hoy ellos pueden someter 1,000 hectáreas bajo un acuerdo de asamblea del territorio en donde destinan los recursos para fines específicos, por ejemplo, para fortalecer centros de salud, de escuelas, abrir caminos, llevar electricidad, etcétera, una serie de acciones que pueden ir haciendo, y producto de la consulta esto nos ha permitido mejorar los esquemas. Hoy por hoy el PSA abre la oportunidad para que tengan un 2% de la tierra en usos tradicionales, donde no limitemos su seguridad alimentaria, donde ellos puedan hacer sus costumbres en la tierra. y mediante la consulta se creó un instrumento que se llama el Plan Ambiental Forestal Territorial, en donde ya incluimos una serie de salvaguardas donde tiene que estar demostrada la participación de la mujer, la participación de jóvenes, la participación de adultos y la asociación de desarrollo integral como la administradora del territorio para fortalecer acciones internas en el territorio con estos grupos. Entonces, todo el proceso de consulta de la estrategia permitió fortalecer estos mecanismos para dar más transparencia a la ejecución de recursos, para dar más participación y a la vez poder establecer esquemas de pago dentro de los territorios para los diferentes actores, ya no solo en temas comunales, sino ahora pueden ser proyectos con mujeres, proyectos con jóvenes, en donde podamos promover más inclusión y participación de actores dentro del territorio. Entonces, esto ha sido un proceso muy rico, nos ha permitido mejorar no solo el programa de pago de servicio ambiental, sino que además fortalecer los mecanismos a futuro para tener más transparencia, más inclusión, más participación, y que entonces no solamente una asamblea del territorio pueda decidir cómo ejecutar los recursos, sino con más participación donde promovemos más acciones.
Thank you, María Elena. Very interesting to hear how this national process has been evolving and it's improving. And now I would like to hear from Yanori that how this project, the GCF project, the results-based payment project, is being aligning with this national process, because the FPIC process that it needs to be done in the project has been also been coordinated and with what Maria Elena has already explained. So maybe Yanori, that you have been working on these indigenous people plans, can tell us about all this work and about how the project is being embedded in the national process, please.
Bueno, primero buenas tardes a todos y todas. Ciertamente, como menciona Noelia y María Elena, hay ya, digamos, dentro de Costa Rica todo un proceso nacional que se ha venido gestando desde hace más de 10 años, y eso definitivamente es una plataforma, ¿verdad?, para que en este caso el proyecto Pagos Basados en Resultados, que recibe financiamiento, ¿verdad?, del Fondo Verde del Clima, pues se vuelva clave y tengamos ya una forma, digamos, de trabajo con los territorios indígenas. El proyecto Pagos Basados en Resultados firma la nota conceptual en el 2019 y de forma muy rápida, en tiempo récord, en cuestión de un año, empieza a implementar. Siempre en compañía, ¿verdad?, de las entidades correspondientes, y eso es también para darles pues un sentido a los mismos territorios indígenas de seguir un proceso robusto, ¿verdad?, que está enmarcado en las salvaguardas, pero también en todo un marco jurídico al nivel país. También, bueno, el momento de conversar sobre el PSA, incluso yo también como una persona indígena que su familia se vio beneficiada por el mismo PSA, pues me permitió estudiar, sacar una carrera universitaria y hoy por hoy también estar apoyando al Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo. Al nivel social, la infraestructura en las comunidades, gracias, ¿verdad?, al dinero del PSA, que es un ingreso directo a los territorios, se construyen calles, se proyectan también acueductos para las comunidades, ¿verdad?, que no tienen agua potable. También hay temas culturales que se entrelazan, el solo hecho de tener una casa cultural donde tener esos espacios de intercambio con las personas mayores, que son un punto central para la cosmovisión de los territorios indígenas. Parte de eso también se financia con el PSA, Hace unas semanas conversaba con un líder indígena y hablaba, decía una frase muy interesante, que era tener consultores locales. Gracias al PSA se pueden pagar estos consultores locales, que son personas indígenas que trabajan para el territorio, con el territorio, y pueden dar seguimiento y así fortalecer capacidades internas para también tener cómo responder a esta cantidad de recursos que ingresan a los territorios. En tiempo récord también el proyecto Pagos Basados en Resultados pues ha tenido un impacto directo en las instituciones, ¿verdad? También trabajo conjunto con ellos, desembolsando este año una proyección de alrededor de 12 millones de dólares, que también van a tener un impacto en territorios indígenas. Esa es parte pues de los beneficios que se ha tenido con el programa de servicios ambientales, y en el caso, digamos, del proyecto y del PNUD como un facilitador acompañando a los procesos nacionales para poder fortalecer y tener esas mejoras de las que también hablaba María Elena, ¿verdad? Que son todos estos 10 años hay fortalezas y también algunas cuestiones que mejorar, y ahora es seguir ese camino también fortaleciendo ese lazo de confianza que ya pues está entrelazado. Gracias.
Thank you, Yanori. And it's amazing to, not just to hear from you, I had the opportunity last month to be in Costa Rica and see what it's, the impact in the indigenous territory, and it's amazing. And it's amazing to hear from you that you are from a Boruca territory and that you are the first indigenous woman in Costa Rica that has a degree in anthropology in the University of Costa Rica, and part of that was paid thanks to the Payment for Ecosystem Services. So congratulations, Costa Rica, and this scheme. Honestly, it's great. And great to see how can be improved and strengthened, as you were saying. And I would like you, Yanori, also to introduce us to the video that we will watch now, because it's a person that you work, you go to the territories, to the Talamanca Cabecar territory, and work with her. I had also opportunity to meet her last month. But tell us about this video, about this woman as well. You already explained us about the infrastructure that they having in the territories and all these benefits that they receiving. But tell us a bit also about Edith.
Sí, bueno, el siguiente video es de una mujer indígena en un territorio que se llama Cabecar de Talamanca, en el Caribe del país, en el Caribe sur del país. Su nombre es Edith Villanueva. Doña Edith es parte de la Junta Directiva de la Asociación de Desarrollo Integral Indígena de ese territorio, pero también es asociada de una de las organizaciones que se beneficia de pagos por servicios ambientales, que son una organización que, bueno, en español significa Guardianas del Bosque. Ellas de hecho ganaron el premio ecuatorial el año pasado, entonces ya de verdad es un desencadenamiento de potencial en el territorio. Bueno, ella va a explicar un poco de los beneficios del PSA, pero también mostrar su historia y su territorio, sobre todo también poder observar que la conservación y el uso de los recursos del entorno es algo que los territorios indígenas hemos hecho sin necesidad de un pago. Y creo que ahí está la clave también de nuestra base cosmogónica, de los seres que están ahí y de por qué protegemos también lo que cuidamos hasta el momento.
importance of the voices from the territories. And we also have a video from Brazil, but Clarice, please, maybe you can also share with us the experience in Brazil with the Floresta Plus program that is being established, and there is a window that is set up also to direct funds to indigenous people. So can you please tell us a bit more? Yeah.
Thanks to my mango trees. Thanks to my gacha trees. Thanks to my forest. Thanks to your forest. Thanks to our forest, we captured 14.7 million metric tons of carbon dioxide during 2014 and 2015. Our beautiful
Okay.
became one of the
Who's sharing the
first
video?
countries
So it's
in
not
the
from
region
there?
to receive
Okay.
payments for results.
So can
from
we
the
just
Green
stop the
Deal
video?
so that we continue to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Martin? No?
So that we continue to
Okay.
Okay.
Now? Yes? Okay. I think they stopped. Okay. So Clarice,
Okay.
please. Tell us about Floresta Plus that is being established and how this window is being set up to direct funds to the indigenous people. How is this participatory process also in Brazil, please?
Okay. Thank you, Noelia. Thank you, everyone. First, I would like to thank the UNDP for the invitation. And just for us to understand a little bit the Floresta Plus project, communities where we work with indigenous people and traditional communities is one of the modalities we have established in the process in this whole project. And the project is also based, I would say, on four main pillars of public policy, which would be the forest code that we established in Brazil, the national strategy for REDD+, the national policy for territorial environmental management of indigenous lands, and finally, the national policy for sustainable development and traditional people and communities. So those are the bases for the discussion of building this modality specifically. Based on that, we have the interpretation, the national interpretation on Cancun safeguards. That's how we build this whole modality. It's also based on the thematic lines that came from the national policy for territorial environmental management of indigenous land, working specifically with this topic. And we have environmental conservation, recovery of degraded areas, agricultural production, strengthening supplies of productions in the Amazonian biodiversity, and surveillance of the territorial protection. So it took us a long time discussing how we could bring these people together, but they are the main pillars on the national strategy for REDD+. So we work with all those that come together in this strategy in the national context. So if we're talking about the Amazon biome, we're talking about the Amazon legal territory, we're talking about more than 700, a little bit higher than that, indigenous community. So it's a lot of people for us to work together. When we designed the benefits, it worked together with indigenous people and local communities in the refinement of this modality. So we brought them together in workshops, in thematic discussions, and so on, around the territory and also in the capital in Brasilia. So it took us a long time discussing that. It took us more than a year to build up the project. So I think it takes time to bring everyone together when we're talking about a territory that has a lot of issues on infrastructure that does not allow us to do Zoom meetings anytime or anything. So it took us a long time to be in person in the territory to bring them together. I think that's one of the main reasons we could discuss that. Despite the discussion that was only one of the modalities in the project, we have two other modalities it took us a long investment in discussion with IPLC. And in the end of this process, we set up this funding window to indigenous people and local community, and voluntarily in presenting this discussion together with them. So presenting the ideas of the whole project to them, and having also the support of local representatives as NGOs and so on, because they will be part of this discussion on implementation. We as federal government don't have the capillarity necessary to implement it without the support of the local representatives. We are talking about enormous territory that does not allow us to do it without the support, not only from the communities, but also from responsible parties that has the knowledge and the know-how to work within the territories and the community. So I would say that's the main discussions on the establishing the window. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And there is, as you were mentioning, it always it's a lot of work and it's a lot of engagement with indigenous people. This processes that takes years, and we've heard also here, and we see how this is building up in the different countries. Also in Ecuador, been for many years working on these processes. So maybe you, Karina, can also share a little bit about this consultation and consent process.
Yes, in the case of Ecuador, we work very hard with the environmental and social safeguards, and one of the main challenges for us has been create a guide, a specific guide to implement the consultation process for indigenous people. But then we have some results, important results. For example, we have channelized some finance for the indigenous people specifically through the implementation plan REDD+. We have used this instrument. They have created an implementation plan by themselves under their own vision, cosmovision specifically. But this instrument allows us to align the national strategies with the specific local and indigenous strategies. This document has the life plan, and they include their own vision, and they have a finance model. So it led us to have funds. If we can guide funds of payment by results, just then canalize to this kind of mechanism. This year we could get or give them $2.5 million that came from payment by results of the same funds that we get to payment for achievements. The same, this is our other mechanism, but our main instrument is the implementation plan for indigenous people. It's very important because they have the property, they are very engagement with the document. It's not the government document. This is their own document, and if they have more funds, they use the same instrument. I think that it has been very useful now.
Thank you, Karina, and very exciting to hear about that. This morning, I guess it's this morning and this afternoon now. So this morning we also had some sessions with indigenous people from Ecuador, and they were telling us how important is implementation. Again, implementation of these plans that you just mentioned. And I would like to play also the video now from Brazil, because it said importance of the voices from the territories, and we also have a video. I don't know who has to play that video. Is that, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Costa Rica. Cuéntanos, por favor, un poco qué están trabajando en el tema de género.
Gracias, Noelia. Bueno, en Costa Rica iniciamos en el 2016 una hoja de ruta para incluir la participación de la mujer en la Estrategia Nacional REDD. A partir de ahí hicimos una serie de actividades que nos permitieron desde un análisis de vacíos identificados en el país hasta las potencialidades donde ellas podían participar. Nos dimos cuenta de situaciones sobre las cuales tenemos que cambiar el chip, como dicen, porque si no, no vamos a promover la inclusión y la participación de las mujeres. Por ejemplo, el programa de PSA paga al dueño que tiene un título de la propiedad. Y en Costa Rica solo el 15% de las mujeres tienen título de la tierra. Entonces, si queremos promover la inclusión de las mujeres, no podemos hacerlo sobre la tierra. Y esto nos orientó, por ejemplo, a que en el plan de acción de género, basado en las 6 políticas de la estrategia, pudiéramos identificar acciones en las cuales ellas formen parte. Entonces, a nivel político, en el Fondo Nacional de Financiamiento Forestal y específicamente en el programa de pago servicio ambiental, la Junta Directiva toma la decisión de incluir un indicador en la matriz de evaluación de fincas que le da más puntaje a una finca que participa una mujer, lo cual no le quita el requisito de ingreso, pero le da la opción de estar de primera en la fila con 25 puntos adicionales para que su finca sea analizada y podamos incluir esta participación. Hemos creado otra serie de acciones como un galardón de igualdad de género que le permite a la mujer visibilizar su unidad productiva, no su finca, sino su actividad, y el gobierno le otorga este galardón sin ningún costo anualmente a las fincas de las mujeres que quieren empezar a hacer acciones afirmativas en su unidad productiva para ir cambiando esa participación de ellas en los esquemas nacionales de trabajo ligados al bosque. También desarrollamos 2 fondos, y uno de estos fondos, con el 10% de los recursos que reciba el Fondo Nacional de Financiamiento Forestal, FONAFIFO, el que implementa el programa de pago servicio ambiental, va a haber un fondo exclusivo para mujeres, en donde ellas puedan traer sus unidades productivas, sus emprendimientos y puedan escalarse, empoderarse, mejorarse, capacitarse para poder hacer más fuerte ese proceso que ellas llevan en sus fincas o fortalecer ese emprendimiento para hacerlo más grande, escalarlo. Y así una serie de acciones que hemos venido promoviendo a nivel interno para dar participación. Un crédito para mujeres al 4% a 10 años plazo, con una serie de actividades en las cuales ellas puedan participar, porque parte del análisis de brechas y vacíos nos permitió identificar todas las áreas donde ellas pueden tener actividades, desde viveros hasta ecoturismo, desarrollo de artesanías, y entonces esto nos permite poder direccionar los recursos hacia esas acciones. Así es como hemos ido ampliando la participación de ellas en los diferentes esquemas de forma tal que nos permita incluirlas en diferentes procesos, no solo en uno, pero sí en diferentes procesos, y ir promoviendo esta participación.
Thank you, Marilena. Excellent to hear how you're promoting this gender equality and women's empowerment with these specific actions that you mentioned. And here also the channel is how then we link also this performance-based payment instrument that we were discussing at the beginning with all these actions that you mentioned, also Maria Elena right now. And in the case of Ecuador, I would like to, Karina, ask you about also how with this instrument is being useful, or how through the instrument can also Ecuador promote this gender equality and empower women.
We have different instruments, but I should say that we are working on a gender action plan that is linked with our NDC. We are working on that, but we have now other instrument that is a diagnostic of gender, but it was not so good because we discovered the huge gender gaps that we have in the Amazonia, especially with indigenous people. It means that the cosmovision in the origin has gender inequality, but it is promoted too for the sustainable, for the gaps of, for example, services. It means water, access to water, or another gaps, development gaps. These development gaps has increased the gender gaps, and the Amazonia is one of the main places where the gender gaps are really high. This diagnostic led us to see the differences between the rural and the urban sector, but we have still the same challenges. We have to close these gaps, and on the other hand, as Marilena said, the financial gaps. Just 30% of women can access to credit. This is because the property of the land. This is still a process. We have implemented a credit and a specific credit. It comes from the funds of the GCF2, and this fund, for example, we have a diagnostic to see what they want. They don't want, the women and indigenous people don't want to lower the credit rates. They prefer to reduce the entrance barriers. It means to not put the property of the land as a requirement to the credits. We implement an experiment. I said an experiment because it's the first time that we do that. We reduce these entrance barriers in order to let the people who is involved with the field farmer schools to implement the transition to production, sustainable production. And we want that more women could be involved, engaged in this, but we are not sure if it's going to work. We are trying to do this, and then we are going to evaluate the results with the time.
Thank you, Karina. So hearing about these challenges and these gaps that you also mentioned, and looking at Brazil, Clarissa, it's also, what can you share with us in Brazil? Are you also facing some challenges, same gaps?
For sure, Noelia. I think that's a discussion that we have all around Amazon, not only, but I'm very glad that I'm the director. I have here my deputy director. It's also part of my team. And my coordinator is also a woman. So we have that in mind. We bear that in mind, the discussions. But also, first of all, in our project advisory committee, we have one indigenous woman representing indigenous people, so which was for us a lucky moment to find. Of course, we try to get the best representation we can, and we establish this criteria to have not only women but also young people and elderly people represented in the discussion. So we are glad that we have Francisca, she was also on the video, in our committee. But also we have, as in the whole discussion of it, establish higher scored criteria for working with women. So that's one of the main criteria, the higher score criteria, when we choose the projects inside the discussions. So I think that was for us the main point, how we could establish that, while we work together with capacitation and training and so on. So we have established that all the NGOs and all the institutions that are working together with us have to go to a specific gender training when they are coming to work in the project. So otherwise, I think we would not manage. We have to establish first capacity building in this discussion so we can fill up this gap. I think that's the main point. And also we set target of having 40% of projects that should consider following 3 criteria. One is the majority of the technical team, the technical staff, composed of women. So that's the first criteria. We have prioritized women as direct beneficiary of these projects. And finally, we have a focus on gender. So that was how we could manage at least for this program. But I think it comes together with this capacity building in the long term to fulfill this gap that we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Clarice. And yeah, interesting also to see challenges, gaps, and same type of activities that we hear here from other countries. Thank you for sharing. And also in Indonesia, there is also strong regulatory frameworks. So could you also, Dr. Wahyu, share with us what is the work in Indonesia related to social safeguards, to gender, and linked to this instrument that you are developing, the performance-based payment instrument?
Yes, thank you very much for this. To respond this question, actually, we're thinking from the first period. We use this program PBP REDD Plus for raising our commitment actually to Cancun's safeguard principle. We understand there are seventh principle is very important because inclusion of the indigenous people, local communities, and genders. This is our principle. So in Indonesia, while we develop the policy and program on the ground, we commit and refer to the principle. I would like to highlight actually three of our Cancun principle, number 3, number 4, and number 5, which indicated that in the first respect to knowledge and right indigenous people and members of local communities. This is very important for us. Using this Cancun principle, we develop indicator on the ground. And the second one, the full and effective participation of relevant stakeholder, in particular indigenous people and local communities. This is also a highlight, a main concern of Indonesian program. And the third one is action are consistent with the conservation of natural forests and biological diversity. This is we analyze the map of the whole territory of Indonesia, where is we can find the local people who are responsible and doing very significant action on the ground and link it to our program in the national level. This is very important. Based on this, we develop some indicator and policy and realize implementation in the we call it investment framework. In this investment framework, we design its indicator inclusion of the indigenous people and gender and local communities. So we make sure with the investment framework is very important to guide us on the ground and make sure that every stakeholder were interrelated and included in our PBP program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wahyu, for this specific also activities and how you're linking the PVP agreement on gender elements. So I would like to open the floor now to questions from the audience. I think we have just 10 more minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been quite an interesting panel. I wanted to know from... Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, me. I am Letícia Guimarães. I work in the Climate and Forest Program for UNDP, and I would be very keen on hearing from countries on lessons learned from results-based payments potentially going into carbon markets and for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So,
okay. In the case of Ecuador, we are developing our first standard of compensation. It is related to Programa Ecuador Carbono Cero, that is a footprint neutral carbon local, a footprint, national program. It means through this program we are engaging to the private sector in order to create a system that they, at the first, they measure the emissions, then they reduce, and then they should compensate. On the other hand, we are working on a portfolio of projects that could be compensated by these enterprises and could be compensated by international enterprises too. This framework should respect REDD+, that REDD+ in Ecuador is a national level, but it is not focused on carbon per carbon. It is focused on projects that initially they reduce, they mitigate the effects of climate change, but mainly they reduce poverty and they promote adaptation projects. So the price of carbon is not related to the amount of carbon, it's related to the price, to the implementation of the project. So this is a different way to see, because it's related to non-market approaches, and it is part of the Article 6.8. That's why we are working.
Thank you, Karina. Any other country wants to answer this question? And then we have two more questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting actually for Indonesian experience. To achieve NDC target, we developed a BBB program, and right now it's run. And the other side, we also developed a market mechanism. So last year we established a presidential decree regarding carbon economic value. We call it carbon pricing presidential decree. And this year we also establishing a new implementation regulation on the carbon economic value. We call it carbon pricing as an umbrella for other sectors to develop their own market mechanism. Based on this regulation, actually, we will develop any sector, give the mandate to the sector to develop their own market. So this is very important. Until the end of this year, we will have at least 4 new regulation based on its sectors in Indonesia. This is a very, very progressive situation in Indonesia. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Demetrio Bocuma Meñé y trabajo para el PNUD Guinea Ecuatorial como punto focal de medio ambiente. Entonces es interesante saber sobre vuestras experiencias y los proyectos que se están implementando en vuestros respectivos países y específicamente están siendo financiados a través del Fondo Verde para el Cambio Climático, lo cual es muy interesante. Ahora mismo que estamos hablando, el gobierno de Guinea Ecuatorial ha remitido una carta de interés al PNUD para que les podamos apoyar en lo concerniente a la elaboración de una nota conceptual y su respectiva propuesta, y para poder someterlo al Fondo Verde. Y el proyecto sería sobre tema de cambio climático, específicamente en lo concerniente a la meteorología y Early Warning System, sistema de alerta temprana. Muy bien, pero lo que pasa a nivel de la oficina, no tenemos suficientes fondos para poder llevar a cabo lo que es la elaboración de la nota conceptual, que costaría alrededor de unos $80, y convertir eso en una propuesta que tal vez sería alrededor de $130. Muy bien, de ahí que me interesaría saber, a la hora de elaborar vuestros respectivos proyectos, las notas conceptuales y también las propuestas, ¿qué tipo de mecanismos utilizasteis para la financiación de esta fase inicial? Muchas gracias.
Yeah, I'll summarize, yeah. So your name, sorry again? Demetrio from Guinea Equatorial. He was explaining about GCF proposal that they're trying to put forward. So he was asking the panelists their experience on accessing financial resources, and specifically on the stage of like the proposal and the cost of this proposal. So how the countries managed to do that.
Bueno, para el caso de Costa Rica, nosotros, como les mencioné, es un proceso que viene desde el 2008. el cual el readiness fue fundamental. Los recursos de readiness fueron fundamentales para poder establecer las acciones que necesitábamos para poder entrar a estos fondos. Entonces, como ya teníamos avance en el proceso, como ya teníamos análisis de coberturas, análisis de imágenes, la asesoría de clima global fue importantísima con las capacidades nacionales para montar las propuestas que íbamos a establecer ante el Fondo Verde del Clima. Entonces, fue un proceso de trabajo interno con personal del país y con toda la asesoría y el acompañamiento de Clima Global que nos ayudaron a montar los documentos, las propuestas para presentarlas al fondo en un tiempo récord. Entonces, sí debo reconocer que los países que no han pasado por Readiness tienen una fase más dura para esto. Los países que ya pasamos por Readiness, que hemos creado capacidades, que tenemos documentación de respaldo, es lo que nos ha permitido llegar. Pero los países que necesitan este paso es más difícil, más lento y tarda más. No es imposible, pero sí tiene un proceso previo para poder estar acá. Y esto también nos ha permitido establecer una línea de cómo queremos entrar a los recursos o cómo queremos acceder a los recursos. Y es un tema de búsqueda de fondos a partir de periodos o años de reducciones de emisiones. ¿Por qué? Porque esto nos permite no tener doble contabilidad, nos permite más transparencia y tener un solo oferente por año para entregar el carbono. Entonces, Costa Rica tiene toda una estrategia de financiamiento por años para colocación de reducciones de emisiones sin que esto vaya en detrimento de su credibilidad ni de su contabilidad y entrega de reducciones de emisiones de forma transparente. Gracias.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Anyone else respond this question?
I think in Brazil we are quite the same as Costa Rica. We established the level of references for a long time. We have been reporting that to UNFCCC every couple of years. So we had the technical annexes of the reports with our data, and it took us a long time, of course, but we have a very good team at the Ministry of Environment that built together with the support of UNDP local office the whole discussion, especially on the envelope for REDD+ agenda. So it was internal work, and we went through all the process of readiness before. So we had national capacity installed in the government to work together. And still, it took us a long time. So it's not an easy process to fulfill all the procedures established by the GCF, but together with the implementation agency that we hired through a public call, we call all the agencies that were accredited in the GCF to come together and present proposals. We evaluate those and then find our agency, and from that on we establish the whole process of building the project. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one last question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have no question actually. I just want to share our stories, what's happening in Bangladesh specifically. I'm from the global south country, Bangladesh, which is one of the biggest climate, we are facing climate change issues. And specifically in the coastal region of Bangladesh, now there the salinity is increasing day by day, and specifically the women, the young generation, children, they are facing a lot of crisis. Besides the climate crisis, they are also facing the water crisis as well. Because of the salinity intrusion, women specifically, they are facing a lot of health issues, and nowadays they are facing cancer and even other issues as well because of the climate change. Even the young people, they are facing climate change in their daily life. Even they are being dropped out from their schools. Even the early marriage is also happening. So I am Shami Mohammed, and I am one of the youth advisors of Asia Pacific Youth Advisory Group, of UNDP, UNICEF, and UNFCCC. So I also work on this, like how the young people are facing climate change in the Bangladesh, Nepal, or the Asia-Pacific region. So I was just wondering, like as you have discussed a lot of issues, it was really great, and I was just interested to share our stories, what's happening in Bangladeshi region. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing also your experience in Bangladesh. I think we are out of time already. Just 1 minute just to wrap up, to close, to thank you for being in this panel and sharing all these experiences. We've seen there's a lot of work done, and a lot of work that needs to be done. Still more work to do, more implementation to see, more results that we will see. So thank you so much for being here. And we just put an end to the webinar. Thank you.